It started with a door that shouldn't have been left open, the kind that creaks a little before you step inside, and changed the course of your own quiet life. I just moved into the old townhouse, the kind of place that carried the scent of varnished wood and fading perfume, as if the walls still remembered the people who'd loved and left within them. She appeared before I'd even unpacked. The landlady, 40, maybe a little more, the kind of woman who didn't try to look younger because she didn't need to. Her confidence wasn't loud. It was in the way she carried herself, graceful yet grounded, like someone who'd seen enough storms to stop fearing the rain. Her hair was long and black, brushing just past her shoulders. When she spoke, her voice had a warmth that could turn a cold room softer. "You must be the new tenant," she said, smiling faintly, her dark eyes studying me like she was quietly reading my story before I'd even told it. I nodded, fumbling with my keys. "Yeah, sorry, the door was open," she finished for me. I left it that way. Some doors should stay open for a while. There was something in the way she said it. Not flirtation, not even curiosity, just this calm awareness that made me feel suddenly self-conscious. She showed me around the place. Every step she took left a faint trace of floral perfume, something light and nostalgic. She'd pause every now and then to brush her hair back, to point out the little details, a crooked shelf, a leaky faucet, a window that needed careful hands to close. And in those pauses, I caught the rhythm of her life, independent, efficient, maybe a little lonely. When we reached the staircase, she hesitated. "This house carries sound easily," she said, her tone changing, softer, almost secretive. "The walls are thin. You'll hear laughter, footsteps, maybe the piano in the evenings. Just don't be alarmed." Her eyes lingered on mine for a second longer than they should have. The air between us grew still, not tense, but aware. I could hear the ticking of a clock from the next room, every second stretching. Later, as she handed me the keys, our fingers brushed. Just a second, enough to notice the warmth of her skin and the steadiness of her breath. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. Then, just as quickly, she smiled again, polite, composed. "Welcome home," she said, turning to leave. But as she reached the door, she glanced back once more. Her voice lowered, almost like she was saying something meant only for me. "And be careful with the noise at night," she murmured. "This house doesn't keep secrets very well." The door closed behind her with a soft click. And in that quiet, the house finally felt alive. The first night passed quietly, or so I thought. The house breathed differently when it was dark. The wooden floors whispered beneath shifting air, and somewhere upstairs, faint music played. It wasn't loud, but enough to make me pause. The delicate hum of a piano, fingers tracing soft notes that carried emotion rather than melody. I followed the sound to the top of the stairs. The hallway was dim, moonlight slipping through thin curtains. From behind a half-closed door, I saw her, the landlady. She was sitting at a small, upright piano, her long black hair falling loosely around her shoulders, her back straight, yet her movements tender. She didn't see me, or maybe she did, but pretended not to. Her fingers moved slowly, like she was remembering something instead of playing it. Each note had weight. Like a confession, she couldn't speak out loud. I leaned against the wall, careful not to make a sound. There was something intimate about watching someone when they think they're alone, not in a voyeuristic way, but in the sense that you're seeing a side of them untouched by performance. Then she stopped. The silence that followed was sharp. Her head turned slightly, her eyes catching the shadow of my figure near the door. I froze. "You shouldn't be up here," she said softly. No anger, just that same calm tone that carried more meaning than her words. "I heard the piano," I replied, my voice low. "It sounded lonely," she finished, her lips curving slightly. I didn't answer. She stood up, smoothing her night robe, soft ivory fabric, light against her tan skin. She stepped closer, and the faint scent of jasmine reached me again. "You're curious," she said, her eyes searching mine. "Most tenants are not." I didn't mean to intrude. Her expression softened. "No, you didn't. But you should know, this house remembers everything. Even footsteps." There was a long pause, the kind that stretches thin until someone decides to breathe again. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that holds more history than words. You can listen if you like. Just quietly. I nodded, unsure if it was permission or warning. She turned back to the piano, the robe shifting gently around her frame. When she began to play again, I sat on the floor by the doorway, my back against the wall, hidden in half shadow. The notes filled the corridor, soft and trembling, carrying fragments of stories I could only guess at. For a moment, it felt like time had folded in on itself. Just two people, separated by a doorway and an understanding that didn't need to be spoken. Then, mid-song, she paused again. Her voice came barely above a whisper, her eyes still on the keys. "Stay quiet," she said. Her fingers lingered on a single note. "Or everyone will hear us." The sound hung in the air, fragile, charged, and for the first time, silence felt dangerous. The next morning arrived softer than usual, a calm, golden quiet that made everything feel a little unreal. I woke to the smell of freshly brewed coffee drifting up the staircase, wrapping the old house in something warm and comforting. Sunlight spilled through the curtains in long, slow ribbons, touching the wooden floor where my shoes had left faint marks from the night before. I went downstairs, still unsure if what happened at the piano was real or some strange dream. She was in the kitchen, hair loosely tied, a few strands falling around her face. The morning light did something to her, softened her features, highlighted the gentle lines near her eyes, the kind that come from too much smiling and too much solitude. "Morning," she said without looking up, stirring her coffee with a silver spoon. The sound echoed faintly in the quiet room. "Morning," I replied, voice still heavy from sleep. There was a pause. Then she glanced at me, eyes meeting mine over the rim of her cup. "You were up late," she said, a knowing hint in her tone. "I heard music," I admitted. "Couldn't sleep after." She gave a small, amused smile. "This house does that to people. It wakes things up." Her words lingered in the air, quiet but loaded. I sat at the small wooden table near the window, trying not to stare, but the way she moved, unhurried, graceful, made it hard to look anywhere else. She poured a second cup and placed it in front of me. "You might as well join me. The mornings here feel less empty that way." The way she said "less empty" made me wonder how many mornings she'd spent alone in this kitchen. We talked, not much, just small things at first. About the town, the weather, the history of the house. But the silences between our words weren't awkward. They were full. Like both of us were learning to breathe in each other's presence. At one point, she reached across the table to take the sugar jar, and her fingers brushed against mine. The touch was light, almost accidental, but it sent a quiet ripple through the air, the kind that shifts everything even when nothing is said. She looked up, just for a heartbeat, eyes steady but soft. Then she smiled again, the kind that hides more than it shows. "You'll get used to the quiet here," she said. "It listens better than people do." I nodded, unsure how to answer. The sunlight caught the side of her face, then golden, gentle, and for a moment I thought I saw something fragile there. Then she turned back to her cup, her voice returning to its usual calm. "I have errands today. Try not to get lost in the silence." When she left, the air still smelled faintly of her perfume and coffee. And in that quiet kitchen, her presence lingered, not as a memory, but as a promise the house itself refused to let go. The day passed slower than usual. Clouds rolled in by afternoon, dulling the colors of everything outside. The sky, the trees, even the street below seemed muted. By the time evening arrived, the storm had settled in completely. Rain tapped gently against the window panes, then harder, until the whole house seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the weather. I was reading in my room when the lights flickered once, then went out. The sudden darkness left only the pale glow of lightning through the curtains. The silence that followed felt too heavy, almost alive. I grabbed my phone for a bit of light and stepped into the hallway. That's when I saw her, standing at the end of the corridor, holding a candle. The flame lit her face in soft gold, her expression calm but alert. Her robe brushed against her ankles, and her long black hair was slightly damp, framing her shoulders in dark waves. "Power's out," she said quietly. as though the storm might hear her. Yeah, I was just checking the fuse box, I replied, even though I had no idea where it was. She smiled faintly, lifting the candle between us. It's in the basement. Come with me. These stairs are tricky in the dark. We descended together, her steps careful, the light swaying with each movement. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of rain seeping through the old walls. When she reached the bottom, she turned slightly, and for a moment the flame caught in her eyes, warm, steady, a little curious. The fuse box was tucked behind shelf. She handed me the candle, our fingers brushing again. The brief contact felt deliberate this time, or maybe I wanted it to be. Here, I murmured, fixing the switch. Sparks flared briefly, and the lights blinked back to life. She exhaled softly, relieved. Well done, she said, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. You've earned your rent for the week. We both laughed, quiet, genuine. But then thunder cracked outside, shaking the windows. Without thinking, she moved closer. Her shoulder brushed against mine, and I felt her steady herself with a small breath. Sorry, she whispered. It's okay. We stood there, closer than we should have been, the candlelight still flickering between us even though the bulbs had come back on. Her perfume, jasmine and something faintly woody, mixed with the scent of rain and old timber. When the thunder rolled again, she didn't move away. Instead, she looked up at me, her voice a whisper. Storms used to scare me, she said, but they also make me feel less alone. Something in her tone made me forget to breathe for a second. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught somewhere between thought and feeling. And she smiled softly, almost to herself. We should check the windows, she said, stepping back. But as she turned away, the warmth of her lingered, like the echo of thunder long after the sky had gone quiet. The storm passed overnight, leaving the world washed clean by morning. When I woke, sunlight was spilling through the curtains again, soft and forgiving. The air carried that faint after-rain scent. Fresh earth, damp leaves, something gentle and new. I wandered downstairs, still half dreaming, half thinking about the night before, the candlelight, her nearness, the way her voice had trembled just slightly when she spoke about storms. She wasn't in the kitchen this time. The coffee pot was empty, but the door to the hallway stood open, and I could hear faint humming coming from there. She was standing by the wall, dusting an old frame. The light caught her hair, still a little wild from sleep, and her robe had been replaced by a loose white shirt tucked into soft beige slacks. Barefoot, quiet, natural, more real than I'd seen her before. Oh, she said when she noticed me. You're up early. Couldn't sleep much, I replied. The storm felt endless. She smiled faintly. They always do. Then they leave you with silence, and you miss the noise. Her hand lingered on the photo frame. It was an old picture, faded at the edges. I stepped closer, and she didn't stop me. The photo showed her younger, maybe in her 20s, standing beside a man. He was smiling, arm around her shoulders, and she was laughing, eyes full of something bright. Your husband? I asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on the picture. She said finally, voice low. He passed away 7 years ago. I didn't know what to say. The words, I'm sorry, felt too small for the weight of that kind of absence. She seemed to sense it and gave a soft, reassuring smile. You don't have to say anything. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can leave, and yet the air still smells like them for years. Her tone wasn't bitter, just quietly truthful. She turned slightly, meeting my gaze. There was something different in her eyes now. Not sadness, exactly, but a kind of peaceful acceptance mixed with fatigue. I almost sold this house after he died, she said. But I couldn't. Every wall had his voice in it. And I thought, maybe if I stayed long enough, it would all fade gently instead of all at once. I nodded, my throat tight. Maybe it has, I said. She looked at me, eyes steady. Maybe not. For a moment, we just stood there. The silence wasn't empty. It felt full, heavy with the kind of understanding words can't shape. Then she reached out, brushed a speck of dust off my shoulder, and smiled softly. You look serious, she said. Don't be. The past only has power if you let it live rent-free. I smiled back, but her touch stayed with me, warm, grounding. As she turned away, the sunlight caught the edge of the old frame again. The two people inside still smiled like time couldn't touch them. And yet, standing there beside her, I realized time was touching both of us. Slowly, gently, inevitably. The days that followed felt lighter, quieter, the kind of calm that hides something unspoken beneath it. We fell into an unplanned rhythm. Shared breakfasts, small conversations, the occasional smile that lasted a second too long. It wasn't planned, but it started to feel natural, like the house itself approved of the silence between us. One afternoon, she was in the garden trimming the roses. The sky was clear, and sunlight glinted off the droplets, still clinging to the petals from last night's dew. I stood by the porch, watching her move with that same grace I'd come to recognize, slow, deliberate, never hurried. Her white linen dress caught the light, and the breeze played gently with her long black hair. "You'll make them jealous," I said, nodding toward the flowers. She turned, half smiling. "Who?" "The roses. They're beautiful," I said, "but you make them look ordinary." She looked down, pretending to focus on the shears in her hands, but I caught the faintest blush rising in her cheeks. "You're too young to be saying things like that," she murmured. "Too honest, maybe." For a moment, she didn't speak. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Then she set the shears down, brushed her palms on her dress, and looked at me. Really looked, not with curiosity or caution, but with something closer to surrender. "You shouldn't say things you don't understand the weight of," she said softly. "I do," I replied. "More than you think." Her eyes searched mine for a long moment, as if testing whether I meant it. The sunlight shifted through the leaves, dappling her face in gold and shadow. Then, quietly, she sighed. "You remind me of him, you know. The way you listen, the way you notice things no one else does." I took a step closer. "I'm not him. I know." Her voice trembled just slightly. "That's what makes this harder." The words lingered between us, tender, dangerous, true. I could feel the pulse of it in the air, a slow thrum of understanding neither of us had meant to reach. Then she looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever feel like life gives you one last chance to feel something real, and you're too afraid to take it?" "Yes," I said. "Right now." Her lips parted slightly, eyes lifting to meet mine again. The sunlight glowed warm against her skin. I could see the question forming there, unspoken, trembling between us. Then she stepped back, the moment folding in on itself. "You should help me with these," she said, her tone gentler now, returning to something familiar, safe. I took the shears from her hand, our fingers brushing once more. The touch was brief, but enough to undo the walls we'd both been pretending still stood. She smiled, but her eyes gave her away, soft, uncertain, full of something that looked like longing. And as the breeze moved through the roses, I realized the silence between us wasn't silence at all. It was a question waiting to be answered. The night it happened, the house was completely still. Not even the usual creak of the wooden stairs, not the faint hum of the old pipes. Just a silence so deep it felt deliberate, as if the walls were listening. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts kept circling back to the garden, to the way she'd looked at me when the light had caught her face, that moment between hesitation and surrender. I went downstairs for some water. The air was cool, the faint scent of jasmine drifting from the open window. When I turned, I saw her. She stood by the doorway, hair loose, wearing a pale blue robe that made her skin glow softly in the lamplight. Her expression was unreadable, calm, but with a certain tension beneath it, the kind that only comes when words are pressing against silence. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Couldn't stop thinking," I admitted. She stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. "That can be dangerous in this house," she said quietly, almost teasing, but there was no humor in her eyes. I smiled faintly. Then maybe I should stop trying to stay quiet. Her breath caught, just a little, the smallest shift, but I felt it. She looked away, her fingers tracing the edge of the table, as if grounding herself. "You don't know what you're doing," she said, voice softer now. "I do," I replied, stepping closer. You told me this house remembers everything. Maybe it's time it remembers something good again. Her eyes lifted to meet mine then, and the world seemed to narrow around that single look. There was no sound, just the rhythm of our breathing and the faint rustle of curtains in the breeze. She didn't move when I reached out, not to take, not to demand, just to let my fingers brush hers, slowly, gently. Her hand trembled slightly, but she didn't pull away. You're making this harder, she whispered. Then tell me to stop. The seconds stretched. Her eyes glistened faintly in the low light. I can't, she said, finally. And that was it. The quiet confession neither of us could run from anymore. She stepped closer until her forehead rested lightly against my shoulder. The warmth of her skin, the faint scent of her hair, the weight of her breath. Everything about that moment was tender, fragile, painfully human. We stayed like that for a long time, saying nothing. Words would have ruined it. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. You'll leave someday, she murmured. They always do. Maybe, I said. But tonight I'm here. She looked up at me, and for the first time, truly smiled. Not politely, not guardedly, but freely, as if she'd remembered how. Outside, the wind shifted through the trees, carrying the faint echo of rain returning. And there, in that quiet room, two lonely lives finally stopped pretending they were strangers.